So if you've watched any of my recent videos, we've talked a lot about how to calculate the precise damage that you would deal against an enemy no matter what target you're shooting, no matter what mods you have on, or no matter what character you're using. And I've made it a point of pride to be able to give you 100% accurate weapon damage. But you'll notice that I have never, not even once, tried to give you a weapon DPS formula. And that is because I wasn't prepared to. There are things in this game that have scared me. A large part of that was fire rate. That was extremely tricky to get calculated on the website calculator here due to dynamic bonuses and shit like that. There's also the recent issues we've discussed where higher fire rates can literally just eat your bullets without actually shooting them. But it may surprise some of you to know that the thing that horrified me the most wasn't fire rate, wasn't damage, it was reloads. And I know I'm gonna get some people laughing at me that say, well, Vesh, it's obviously just you take the base reload time that's in the UI and then any speed bonuses you have are a % reduction on that time. You're an idiot. To which I would normally say, yes, I am an idiot. But thankfully, you and every single person who has ever tried to give you a weapon DPS formula is a bigger one. Unsurprisingly, this game fucking lies to you, and we're going to talk about how. To prove this, we are going to use my calculator website, and we're also going to use my editing software. I have recorded on two different weapons, Vestigial Organ and Piercing Light. Vestigial Organ in particular, because it has the longest base reload time in the game at 4.2 seconds. Piercing only has like 2.6, but the whole point was to get two different weapons, and they have different internal stats as well, because this game has stats for each weapon that they don't actually show you, and believe it or not, they are relevant. In each case, we have a scenario where no mods were used, Recycling Genius was used, Fire Rate Up was used, and then we had two reload mods in Fire Rate, and then we had Concentration Priority for negative reload speed. This graph is going to get used a lot as we add different mods and line them up with our recordings. So to quickly explain, each dot here represents one shot from Vestigial Organ, and then this gap here is the gap between the last shot fired and when the reload actually starts. Because the reload doesn't start the moment your magazine hits 0. There's a slight delay, and that delay is the exact same amount of time it would have taken to shoot another shot. And then your reload happens, and there's a lot of shit that goes on between there that we'll talk about in a minute. And then after the reload happens, we have what is called a ready state, and that's this last dot here. Now, on the graph right now, it happens to line up with the time it would have taken to shoot another shot, but please don't interpret it that way, because fire rate will make this gap smaller, but fire rate will not make this gap smaller. This ready time is different for every single weapon on how long it actually takes, and I can't actually find a stat that modifies it at all. But all this dot is meant to represent is how long does it take after the reload has finished before your weapon would fire again. Let's start by lining things up though. So from the moment the first shot is fired until the moment the last shot is fired, when our magazine shows 0, but before the reload starts, we line up at exactly 55 frames. So 55 divided by 60 is roughly 0.91 seconds, which has a little bit of variance, but that adds up with what the calculation says at 0.9 seconds. Then we have a gap that is equal to the time it would take to shoot one more shot before the reload starts, which would be at 1.2 seconds. And if we scooch over to when our crosshairs disappear and the reload UI actually begins, that is also at 1 second and 13 frames divided by 60, 1.2. So when the reload starts isn't in question. We can show this a gajillion different ways. So in the future, I'm never going to, well, correction. When fire rate is involved, we'll circle back to that again. But when it's just reload, we're always going to assume the reload starts at 1.2 seconds on Vestigial Organ, because that will never change. Then when it comes to when the reload ends on my calculation at 4.9 seconds with a duration of 3.7 seconds. Now you're going to be a little confused because earlier I said that Vestigial Organ has the longest base reload time at 4.2 seconds. And that is correct. That doesn't actually mean the reload takes 4.2 seconds. This game fucking lies to you. The game has an internal stat on every weapon that is called zoom in hold delay time. And how you get the actual reload time is you take the base reload time of the weapon, you subtract zoom in hold delay time, which is not even displayed in game, by the way. We have to go in and look at this shit. And then you have the actual base time. And then on top of that, reload speed does not work as a % modifier as the UI would imply. Reload speed is calculated by taking the base reload time after this zoom in hold delay time is removed, and then you divide it by 1 plus your reload speed bonuses. It's not a % reduction, it's actually so much worse. Reload speed is significantly worse than you ever thought it was, and we'll talk about that more later. But if we're talking about how to calculate the end of a reload, assuming that we are firing constantly from the moment the reload starts, we're still holding down the fire trigger, to the moment the reload ends, because we're reload canceling since we're holding down the trigger that whole time. The way you calculate that is, again, taking the base duration as the game claims it is, subtracting this mystical magic number that the game doesn't actually show, and then that's your actual base reload time. And so in the case of Vestigial Organ has a zoom in hold delay time of 0.5. 4.2 minus 0.5 is 3.7. And to prove that, I can go over here and show exactly when the reload ends. So we see the reload delay shows here, and then in the next frame, the reload UI is gone, and our magazine shoots from 0 rounds to 4 rounds. So the reload is complete here, and that is at 4 seconds and 55 frames. 55 frames divided by 60 is 0.91. So we are now at the 4.9 the calculator prophesied. Base reload times are a lie. So this is just one of 2 ways that everyone has their reload math wrong. Anyways, now we have the delay. But the time that Vestigial Organ can actually shoot again is after this delay, after the reload has already finished, and that time is modified by another internal stat called ranged in time. And in the case of Vestigial Organ, that is 0.3 seconds, which is after 4.9. 4.9 plus 0.3 is 5.2, and we can line up when the next shot actually fires by going over to here. Our magazine drops from 4 to 3 in the next frame, and this is at 5 seconds and 11 frames. 11 frames divided by 60 is 0.18, 5.2, it's close enough. We're always going to have a slight discrepancy when it comes to frame analysis, so just bear with me there. But obviously it could be a fluke that I happened to line things up perfectly when there are no mods in play. So now let's put mods in play. Let's remove our base testing with no mods, put that over here, and then let's go move on to when Recycling Genius is equipped. So we know our reload will start at 1.2 seconds as discussed before. We don't have any fire rate mods on, so it's not going to modify the time it takes to reach the reload. The only thing we're doing here is putting on Recycling Genius and changing the time of the reload itself. Now, as I said before, reload actual time is calculated by taking the base reload time minus the, I already forgot what the stat is called. I don't give a shit. And then you divide it by 1 plus your reload speed bonuses. Positive reload mods that reduce the speed are basically worthless, because the way this thing is structured, it means that in order to reduce your reload time by half, you would have to have a 100% reload speed bonus. It does not mean that 100% reload speed bonus takes away 100% of the time. That is not what this does. It is so much worse. And then on the flip side though, this also means that negative reload bonuses are extremely horrible to have, because while the positive side doesn't net you that much, the negative side scales exponentially into how much it can fuck you. Granted, the negative side is limited at a 30% bonus. Again, as mentioned earlier though, the reload starts at 1.2 seconds. In this next test, we only have Recycling Genius on, so that doesn't modify the fire rate or the time it takes to reach the reload. The only thing Recycling does is change how long the reload lasts. So we can line up that the reload actually starts at 1.2 seconds. The crosshairs disappear here, and then it switches to the reload UI. But after that, the reload lasts until right here is where our magazine shifts to 4. And that is at 4 seconds and 2 frames. 2 divided by 60 is 0.03. And then we can see if we add on Recycling Genius, our start is still at 1.2, but our end is at 4.046, which is barely off from our predicted value. So everything is lining up still. But now let's go look at Recycling Genius and Reload Focus. So this is going to give a bonus of 55% reload speed. And on that note, a lot of people are under the impression right now that reload speed is capped at 50%. It may have been in the past. That is not the case now. Reload speed right now is actually capped at 90%, but it doesn't mean anything because reload isn't worth shit. But again, we will line up our reload start at 1.2 seconds, which is 1 second and 12 frames. That still lines up. And then if we go to where the reload ends, it ends at 3 seconds and 35 frames. 35 divided by 60 is 0.58 seconds. And if we look at reload focus added in there, that is at 3.58 seconds, which lines up exactly with where we should be. Lastly, for good measure on the reload speed bonuses, let's look at concentration priority, which gives you a negative 30% reload modifier. Again, we're starting at 1.2 seconds because that's exactly where the reload starts. And if we go over to where the reload ends, it takes a long fucking time. And this is what I mean by negative reload penalties are so much worse. They're disproportionately bad in comparison to the actual reload speed benefits. Speed benefits do nothing. Speed penalties absolutely fuck you over. Because now the reload comes over and it ends clear the shit at 6 seconds and 27 frames. 27 divided by 60 is 0.45. We see our reload ends at 6.486 seconds, just barely off from the predicted time. Once again, we have slight discrepancies due to frame analysis. That's normal. The point of this is simply that I can prove I can line up any single reload time on any single weapon, no matter their speed. And this should hopefully prove to all the nimwits who are going to use the UI to combat me that the UI is fucking atrocious and it almost never tells you the truth. Ever. So please do not use the UI as a counterpoint if you happen to disagree with me for some godforsaken reason. That said, now that we've covered speed bonuses, let's talk about the ready state gap after a reload is completed, and why I say I can't find anything that actually modifies this. The reload speed doesn't modify this gap, and fire rate doesn't either. If we go and look at just fire rate up, we see that the time it takes to reach the last shot from the time the first shot is fired at 41 frames. So 41 divided by 60, we're at a roughly 0.683 second window, which does line up with the expected duration. Then the reload starts at 0.9 seconds exactly, which does line up over here, 55 frames. 55 divided by 60 is 0.9. And then if we go over to when the reload ends at 4 seconds and 35 frames. 35 divided by 60, so 4.583, which does line up with the expected of 4.6 seconds. Now, this is just to show that no matter what, this gap is going to be 0.3 seconds on Vestigial, because the first shot gets fired 0.3 seconds afterwards at 4.9 seconds, which does line up over here at 4 seconds and 52 frames. 52 divided by 60 is 0.86. Slight discrepancy, it's whatever. I can't tell if weapon change speed modifies this. I can't tell if there's a move speed factor in here. In the end, I am going under the assumption that literally nothing can actually modify this time as the ready state gap. And so that's yet another reason why everyone's DPS formulas are wrong, because everyone's DPS formulas operate under the assumption that whenever your firing is done, you just instantly go into this reload state, and then everyone also assumes that the reload modifiers act as a percent reduction, and now we know they don't, and now we know we have this stupid ass fucking delay we have to account for afterwards. But the good news in all this is because we know about these stats, and because we know how all this is calculated, we now know exactly how reload canceling works, because a lot of you will notice in-game when you go to shoot a weapon for a long time, your Enduring Legacy, your Thunder Cage, any of that shit, when you're reloading, if you were holding the trigger, at some point in that reload, the reload will skip to the end, and then you'll just suddenly have your ammo back. And a lot of you have been confused by that. That is the zoom in hold delay time difference. So the exact amount of time that you can reload cancel on a weapon is determined by this stat. And the reason people have had a hard fucking time trying to figure this out is because it's literally different on every fucking weapon. On top of that, the delay after the reload finishes is determined by this ranged in time, and neither of these can be modified by any actual stats. So I don't blame people for not having known this, though I do kind of blame the people giving you DPS formulas, because they were mega fucked. In the end, the key takeaway here should be, once again, the game has lied to you, no surprise. But the other main point is that every DPS formula that everyone has ever used for weapons is wrong. All of our reload shit is fucked. And on top of that, now that we know how reload bonuses are actually calculated, positive reload bonuses are almost worthless. On larger, very long reload weapons, sure, they might help a little, but I guarantee you the value everyone has placed on reload mods is about to go down the drain.